Hey folks, welcome back to another episode of Dragons and Dice. Today I'm going to be talking about ways to let each of your players shine by giving them the spotlight for a session. So it's going to be a little more DM centered, but that doesn't mean that the players out there won't get something out of this too. If you hear something that I do for my players that you like, ask your DM to start adding that stuff to your games. Respectfully, I might add. Us DMs are a fickle group, huge egos, God complex, and we hold your characters' loot and lives in the palms of our hands. I hope that comes across as a joke, but if it hits too true and that's how your DM is, maybe just let this one slide and don't bring it up, and just enjoy the show. Welcome to Dragons and Dice. So this is going to be, from my viewpoint as the DM, and it's just going to be about letting each of your characters have a time to shine. I like to do this for each person at the table individually, but since each character at your table is always going to be entirely different, this episode's kind of going to be an overview of the ways that I go about doing that, and then you all can just refine them down to customize it to what each individual player at your table likes. I mean, the first thing I want to go over is you got to know your players at your table. And if you're with a group of friends, you've probably got a good feel for what each of those folks are into and what they want out of the game. And if you're not buddies before you start, I mean, you soon will be. You spend 4 hours a week or every couple weeks together and you get to know people. The best way to go about this is just simply ask them, what ratio of exploration, combat, and role play each person is interested in. And that's going to give you a really good guide of what to do for each individual that's at your table. And kind of let them have their day in the sun. The table I'm running right now has 7 players at it. They all like a lot of different things. I mean, they do agree on beating the living tar out of all my monsters and giving me, incessant hell is their favorite. But they do each like individual things. So to keep the game fun for everybody at the table, since they like a lot of different things, I try to cater to different players at different times during the campaign. I do this first and foremost by making quests out of each of their backstories, and that just gives you a guaranteed way that that person is going to be the star for the night. And these vary from cool roleplay encounters where they are the focus and the NPCs are people from their past. And these are a great way that you can show your players that you're listening to their backstory and the effort that they're putting into their stories and the growth that they're hoping for with their characters. One thing that, as a DM, it's really easy, especially if you're doing an entire homebrewed campaign, is to get tunnel visioned about where you are wanting the story to go and not giving the players enough creative space. If your D&D campaign was a book, you wouldn't be the author. You would be the person that wrote the inside cover and the sleeve and then filled out the table of contents. And then the players are going to be the people that are filling out the meat of each of these chapters and telling the story as you all go together. And so to kind of keep the book analogy going, use each of your characters' backstories as a chapter in the book of the story that you're telling with your D&D campaign and just make them the star for it. And these will be different for each of your individual characters as you get to know them and what they're interested in. I have some people, they want to blow crap up and do cool fighting stuff. If that's the case, give them a chance to shine. Give them like a one-on-one spotlight, whether they're fighting their nemesis or an arch rival or some big baddie and they get the chance to save someone. But just give them like that opportunity to kind of be like out there on their own or in a smaller group than your full group so that they get a chance to really be the star of the show for that evening. And for other characters, like the one that we just did most recently at my home table, it was almost entirely role play. It was in the character's hometown and we went down trip down memory lane, all the people they met. You get to do a whole bunch of backstory stuff, flesh it out, and it just ended up being a really good session. We had one fight in the whole session. It went 3 rounds was all, but it was one of the most fun nights of D&D because that player character was really into role play, and we just really jived for the evening, and it was fun for everybody there. Even though he was kind of the focus of it, they're all there in the town and getting to learn history of that person and everything with it. And it makes that person kind of on the pedestal, even though the whole group is still playing. But it's just a really cool way to, put some importance into the work that character has put into their backstory. Little DM sidebar here. As you get to know your players, you'll kind of figure out how much you want to work out with them before the session and how much of it you want to do off the cuff. I've done a few of these where me and just the person whose background story would work out how we wanted the evening to go as the story that they were wanting to tell. The most recent one, the bard that we were playing his backstory through, is one of the better role players at my D&D table. And so I didn't tell him a single thing except that we were going to his hometown, and we did it all off the cuff. Now I had a bunch of stuff prepared and all the people that were going to fill out and flesh out his backstory, but we just did it, ad lib as we went, and it was really fun evening. And those are some of the best nights when it's just like off the cuff, back and forth with your players, and it's really fun to DM sessions like that. So get to know your players in that aspect. Either plan it out with them because that'll make that player more comfortable and they'll kind of know where it's headed and know the story that they want to tell with it. Or if you have someone that's open to the just, yes and of ad lib, just go off the cuff with it, prep what you want the, evening's feel to be, and then just let it run its course. You can end up with some really fun sessions that way. My next way of letting a character shine will kind of tie in with that last one. Putting hometowns into your D&D game is a really good way to steer the focus toward an individual player. It lets you fill in extra stuff and flesh out your players' backgrounds, and it is a great time to interject some humor and rib your players a bit as a DM, which is always a blast. As all those people in your hometown, they know all those stories about you when you were growing up that you don't want to broadcast to the world, and it's just great fun to have the old barkeep rib the bard for the first song he ever sung, or the town jester to make fun of that time they peed their pants because the joke was so funny, or anything you want to do to kind of just throw in some extra humor there. It's a great time to do that if you have a hometown, because that's where people's histories are from. It's also a great time to have some real serious and heartfelt moments in your campaign, as where all those people that know all the goofy stuff, they know all the stuff that also matters to you. And it's a real good way to flesh out your D&D players' characters and help them with that and make them a lot more well-rounded out and have a lot more backstory with them. I go about doing this in two ways. If I have a really creative player and I think that they'll be comfortable with it, I will let them just describe NPCs and people that they meet. I'll be like, there's a lady walking down the street. That is, and then let them just go from there and tell you what that lady means to them and their history and background. And whatever they say, it just becomes canon for your campaign, because this is sharing the creative process with them. If you have players that won't like being put on the spot with like that, I go ahead and pre-make all the NPCs and give like a little bit of backstory, like written out in their little blog or blurb about what they do and who they know and how they relate to that character. And then I will let the character whose hometown it is kind of take the lead, let them make like history checks with advantage to be like, oh, that was, Farmer Wilson over there. He is the one that had the cow that got loose and ate all the pumpkins that one year. You can just make up little snippets like that. Let them do a history check, so it kind of seems like they're still getting to be in charge of it, but you're not putting as much of the onus of creativity onto that person. You're kind of sharing the load with them. And that's just a comfort thing. Some players, they don't want you to step on their toes and take over part of their story because they love that part of D&D. Other characters might be a little intimidated by that. As you get to know your players, just take that as it goes. The ones that need it, help them with it. The ones that don't, give them the freedom, let them run. Another way on a little smaller level to let single individual players kind of shine and get the spotlight when they normally don't is to kind of load the deck for what you want the evenings or sessions ability checks to be. And you can just create situations where it will make the party change who the face of the party is, at least for a little bit. That's right. Suck it, rogues. You're level 7 reliable talent, never fell in a check. Not really. I like having rogues at the table. They're fun. They add a lot of shenanigans, and it's nice to be able to have people that can pass your checks for you, because sometimes you need that for stories. But anyway, if you have a session where it's going to be more important for like the NPCs to find the party intelligent instead of just charismatic, because maybe you're talking to a librarian or the arch wizard and he doesn't care how dashing and good you are with the loot, we're looking at you, bards. it'll really change the dynamic of what the evening's checks are going to be, and it'll let your wizard or artificer, somebody who's got an intelligence stat as their main stat, and they're kind of like, single attribute dependent. They don't get to make a lot of checks because they're kind of loaded up in just that one. Change what the checks are for an evening. When you do that, don't let that librarian or that arch wizard don't accept charisma checks for it. Maybe they're, sapiosexual and they only find intelligence attractive, and they don't care, how good you are with the instruments or how charismatic you are. All they care about is that if they let you into that restricted area, they know that you're going to be honorable to their books and be able to use the knowledge that you find. And it's just a good way of like kind of stacking the deck to let other people get to make the checks in town and around stuff, because it's very easy for bards. They have jack of all trades. They're proficient in almost everything. They have good charisma score. You're great in town. Same thing for rogues. You get so many expertise. Rangers too. And it's just, a good way to spread out the ability checks, and it lets the people who normally don't get the spotlight when you're doing those sort of things get to step up and be like, oh, well, I am very good at this. Same thing with clerics. You can do religion checks, or paladins for that matter also. Nature for rangers and druids, like stuff that kind of is a little more class focused and kind of tropish to what the class should be good at. Have an evening where the checks are going to be more focused on that. And then if you do that, only accept checks from people who are proficient in that skill. Like that librarian won't take a check from somebody if they don't have Arcana, because they expect you to be knowledgeable about this. It's a great way to kind of twist the way the normal dynamic of your party's interaction with your NPCs goes, and a really good way to let the other characters at your table step up and shine for a little bit and get the spotlight. And don't get me wrong, when I, single out bards and rogues when I'm saying this is only on like small instances. Those are classes that a lot of their worth in their D&D is based off their skills, so it's not really fair to like nerf that down. Be like a fighter and you're like, well, you can't have a third attack. Don't do this all the time. Just at times to let the wizard shine with their intelligence. Put yourself in a library or an arcanum or wherever it works that you can have intelligence be the main stat. But don't step all over your bard and rogues and your good skill monkey classes. That's kind of what their classes are based off of. You have to respect that too. Another thing that's like a good way to go about this when you're in town, give the party two things that are happening at the same time. And then it'll make them like naturally split. And now instead of just having one face of the party, you have two, and you can kind of spread out how ability checks are going for the evening. And it lets that character they're obviously going to send the druid and the ranger to the gardens to check on the sick plants, and they're going to send the fighter and the barbarian to the training rink to speak with the shield master of the town. That type of thing, where it lets those people kind of diversify and kind of shine in the areas that they're specialized in. Another DM note here, I think that skill checks in general should be spread out amongst the table, and that most of the time you shouldn't let an entire table do one check. I mean, if the whole group walks into a big room, they want to, perceive and investigate, that kind of makes sense. But every perception roll shouldn't be a group activity. What I've done to make this seem a little more integrated in the game, seem a little more natural, is like if you make them give you a walking order, and when you're traveling down the trail, the two people in the front can make perception checks to see what's up ahead of them. The person in the back can make checks from the back. And then the people in the middle, they have to either make those checks with disadvantage because now there's people in between them and it's harder to see, or you don't let them make the checks, because this gives you a chance for like your ranger to show how good they are at tracking. And for someone at the back, like maybe you put that rogue at the back because they're sneaky and they will be able to catch the people that are trying to sneak up on you. It lets you kind of spread the party's skill checks out, even though it's the same traveling group. And it's just like a way of spreading out who gets to make all the checks, and not just being like, well, that wizard and the cleric, they want to be safe in the middle and they both got, max perception and wisdom stats. They're going to find everything. It doesn't make sense for them to be making those checks if they're in the center of the group, though, and they're trying to find stuff that's coming up behind them or in front of them. So kind of like narrow down who you let make checks is another good way of kind of spotlighting a little bit more on 1 to 2 players for what this situation is. Now it's time for the homebrewed item of the week. This week's homebrewed item is going to be a combination of 2 D&D classics put into one made for a bard. So, One thing bards have, they have poor weaponized bonus action. They get almost none. And they also have really poor armor classes, especially if you haven't multi-classed out. And I would make a caveat. I wouldn't make one of these for a bard who had multi-class. But if you just have a true bard, it is really cool to combine an animated shield with a dancing sword. And the way I've done this is it's a big double base with a rapier style bow that the bard can activate both with one bonus action. And then they can make bonus action attacks with their dancing sword. And then they get +2 armor class from an animated shield, which is really just a enchanted instrument that hovers in front of you and boosts your armor class up. But it's a really neat way to combine two really fun D&D items into one to make your bard have a little more combat pizzazz. And like I said, if you got a bard that's multi-class with warlock and, paladin or other stuff like that, I wouldn't add one of these in. But if you have just like a true bard, this is a really cool way to make them have just a little bit more fun in combat and add 2 D&D classics to your game. So the double base with a rapier bow as an animated shield and a dancing weapon. Add one to your game. I'm sure your bards will love it. Okay, the last way to let each player have some solo time is to make an area in your campaign where the party can engage in like games of chance, one-on-one combat or races and the such. And this lets people each have a turn doing which chosen task they've done. The one I have built right now is a traveling circus that has a micro battle arena. And the proprietor has monsters of all different CRs stored in tiny blocks. And they've been reduced. And then the players can go up the table, place their hand on a gem, and then it's Honey, I Shrunk the Kids time. And then they get to fight those monsters one-on-one in Mortal Kombat. And then the rest can stand around and gamble on who the winner will be. And this can be expanded into like a full-on Monster Madness bracket, and you can let the players take on higher CR monsters as they go. One thing of note, don't do these just like, if you have like a big table, like so I have 7 at my table right now. If I just let one person fight like a handful of monsters till they die, that's really boring for the other 6. But a really easy fix for this is you can put like half the party out on the battle map at one time. If you're playing with a VTT, this is real simple. If you're playing on grid and graph, you just put your 2 minis together, the next person's 2 minis together, the next person's 2 minis together. But if you're on a VTT, you can just circle the players with like this paladin's yellow and he's fighting that owlbear, it's yellow. Put 4 groups out on the battlefield at the same time, roll initiative for them all, and then just go right on through with the fights. But that paladin who's fighting that owlbear, they can only interact with each other. So it's like each person has their own individual monster, but you have a big spread out initiative with everything on the same table so that half the party can be fighting and see what's going on. The other half can be like gambling and interacting with the NPCs. And then it gives the players each time to make their turns as you go. And then you get just enough downtime to figure out what you want your next move as the monsters from the other people go. And it's just a really fun way to let your players have a chance to really shine in a solo battle. And I don't let them take rest in between. After they clear 5 rounds, they can do a short rest and get some of their stuff back. But this is a good time for them to experiment with everything that their characters can do, because a lot of times, like the last battle we had, I had 2 CR, 15 monsters, 7 level 11 characters. They died in 3 rounds. My monsters, not the characters. There's a couple crits, and it was just like, boom, one guy went down right off the rip, and it's like, well, that was, 250 HP, just burnt through in no time. Nobody got to blow any cooldowns. And if you've got a character that has some ramp-up time, and you're playing in a situation like that, it really detracts from what all you can do, because it's like, do I want to do my, 3-round combo to really get going when the fight's going to be over in 3 rounds, as opposed to I just went ahead and did my attacks and got my hits in. This is a nice way to let each character expand what they get to do in combat, really fill out all the things that they can do. And it also creates more creative characters for your table, because once you start running out of stuff, you got to get a little more creative in like how you manipulate the battlefields. And I think this is a really nice way, because you're just one-on-one. There's no one else there to help you. And then you're going to run out of stuff and you got to figure out something new. So add something like this into one of your tables. It's also a really great way, if you don't have a lot of stuff prepared for a session, have the traveling circus come by. You can do an evening of fighting stuff. Nobody gets upset when they get to kill stuff in D&D, and they're like, oh man, that was a really cool session. We all did, the circus fights and did the battle arenas, and it gives you a little break as a DM, as a good filler, and you get to give out experience. Whoever makes it the farthest, you can give out loot. It's just a really nice little one-on-one combat thing that lets each individual player shine and show off their abilities. Well, folks, that's it for this episode of Dragons and Dice. I hope you enjoyed all the ways to let those little players of yours shine. And as a DM, that should be our goal out there, making it a good story that we tell together, and letting each person have their own little time in the spotlight. I think is a great way of going about that. As always, thank you all so much for spending your time listening to me go on about my favorite game, D&D. And if you could, tell a friend about the show, give a like, give a follow, leave a comment. All that stuff helps immensely with the exposure of the show. And until next time, may your DMs be kind, and may your D20s roll high. Bye.